Take your time.
It's also interesting to notice who it is we assassinate. Do you ever notice who it is? Stop to think of who it is we kill. It's always people who've told us to live together in harmony and try to love one another. Jesus, Gandhi, Lincoln, John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, John Lennon. They all said, try to live together peacefully. Bam!
Do you get your news from television, radio, or newspapers? Do you feel that, despite press releases, top stories, headlines, and sound bites, the news doesn't always give you the whole picture? Do you consider yourself a good, honest, tax-paying voting citizen? Do you hope that your bank has your best interest at heart? Do you sometimes feel that there's something hidden below the surface story of world events, but just don't have the time or energy to look into it? These questions may seem unrelated, but you will soon realize their correlation. So strap yourself in, and let's take a trip through time. In late 2003, we embarked on our first cross-country road trip from Canada to the United States. There was nervousness and excitement in the air. The world had seemed to have changed so much since the September 11th attacks. At least, that's what we were being told. Everywhere to be seen, countries going to war, calling each other evil, immense polarization dividing the people, the gap between rich and poor increasing steadily. Plenty of struggle to go around. And now, a new environment of fear, where anyone could be a terrorist, and we, the people, would have to give up our liberties just to be safe. I remember entering the new millennium with hope. Hope that things were getting better in the world. Hope that we were solving the big problems of the planet. Hope that my kids would grow up in a world better, not worse, than the one I was living in. In the span of a few short years, my hope has been seriously tested. We had to see for ourselves whether America was still the land of the free, home of the brave, or if it was becoming the land of the fear and home of the slave. Almost as a joke, I was given a book called Alice in Wonderland and the World Trade Center Disaster, Why the Official Story of 9/11 is a Monumental Lie. Now, I was never into reading any conspiracy literature, because I was satisfied reading the newspaper, watching CNN, and knowing all the pop culture infotainment news. I'd never actually read a book like this before, but the author seemed like he had some interesting viewpoints. At the Canadian-American border, our vehicle was selected for an intense search. They even called in the dogs. Somehow, I'd expected we'd be searched, found clean, and be on our merry way. But what happened next, I did not expect. After about 45 minutes, a gruff-looking border agent entered our waiting area carrying my knapsack with his arm outstretched like the bag was a piece of evidence. The agent approached me and told me he was interested in discussing the book. I was escorted to another area of the border facility, and they began questioning me as to my intentions in coming to the United States, what my knowledge of the book was, as well as whether I had any affiliations to political organizations. It was almost a blur. But I looked the agent square in the eye and told him the truth about what I was doing, answering his questions about where I was going and why I had the book. The whole time I kept wondering, half jokingly, what is the big deal here? It's a book written by a guy who thinks reptilian aliens are in control of humanity, right? I wasn't about to take a 9/11 conspiracy book seriously, and yet here these guys were, Gestapo style, treating me like I was smuggling a weapon of mass destruction into the country. After talking my way out of this misunderstanding, eventually we were allowed to enter America. The agents were even nice enough to let me keep the book, but told me that I would be put on some kind of watch list. And that was that. We drove to Texas. It was a great state with some really nice people. But during that trip and on the way home, the contents of that book were the seeds that grew into the journey of this film, researching a great number of subjects to do with the world around us, from governments and terrorism to economics, spirituality, industry, law, religion, energy, and the media and other subjects that have continually blown my mind again and again. I've spent literally thousands of hours researching, many sleepless nights, some nights even questioning my own sanity. I've traveled by plane, by car, and reached out by phone to discuss many subjects with many hundreds of people, and reached thousands upon thousands on the internet. This film is the result of the belief that there are some serious challenges in the world that need urgent attention, but yet haven't been identified by the majority of people. The cause of this is this deliberate suppression by the powers that be. So the hope is that by reaching out to educate people, on a mass scale, a large positive change can be the effect. There is an awakening happening to all of humanity. The question becomes, do you want to stay asleep or wake up and open your mind? Everybody makes choices in their lives, each and every day. We base these choices on the information we have at any given moment about how to deal with a situation. As human beings, when we feel we don't have sufficient information to make a good choice, we seek information from others, placing our trust in their hands. Now, isn't it possible that the people that provide official information to you, the politicians, news anchors, professors, doctors, lawyers, generals, bankers, and other authorities would ever use that information to manipulate the public for their own gain? What if you had the power to buy up the entire world, to essentially play God with people's destiny through a monopoly on owning all currency? Would you own and control it all? Everyone's lives? Everyone's thoughts? It turns out there are people who would, and who are actively working to be our owners.
The spirit of inquiry, the search for greater truth beyond religion and science, the profound seriousness of doing real thinking, philosophy, and ontology, these are almost totally lacking in humanity. Humanity is therefore subhuman from lack of genuine intelligence. They automatically reject any emerging facts or realities that do not fit in their brain-dead cognitive pattern of belief and disbelief. They watch too much television.
The golden rule. He who has the gold makes the rules.
They use their tongues to deceive. The venom of snakes is under their lips. Their mouths are full of bitterness and curses. And in their paths, nothing but ruin and misery. And the fear of God is not before their eyes. They have taken the hearts and minds of our leaders. They have recruited the rich and the powerful. And they have blinded us to the truth. Our human spirit is corrupted. Why do we worship greed? Because outside the limit of our sight, feeding off us, perched on top of us from birth to death, are our owners. Our owners. They have us. They control us. They are our masters. Wake up. They're all about you, all around you.
But there's a reason. There's a reason. There's a reason for this. There's a reason education sucks, and it's the same reason that it will never, ever, ever be fixed. It's never going to get any better. Don't look for it. Be happy with what you got. Because the owners of this country don't want that. I'm talking about the real owners now. The big, the wealthy, the real owners, the big wealthy business interests that control things and make all the important decisions. Forget the politicians. They're irrelevant. The politicians are put there to give you the idea that you have freedom of choice. You don't. You have no choice. You have owners. They own you. They own everything. They own all the important land. They own and control the corporations. They've long since bought and paid for the Senate, the Congress, the state houses, the city halls. They got the judges in their back pockets, and they own all the big all the big media companies. So they control just about all of the news and information you get to hear. They got you by the balls. They spend billions of dollars every year lobbying to get what they want. Well, we know what they want. They want more for themselves and less for everybody else. But I'll tell you what they don't want. They don't want a population of citizens capable of critical thinking. They don't want well-informed, well-educated people capable of critical thinking. They're not interested in that. That doesn't help them. That's against their interest. That's right. You know something? They don't want people who are smart enough to sit around the kitchen table and figure out how badly they're getting fucked by a system that threw them overboard 30 fucking years ago. They don't want that. You know what they want? They want obedient workers. Obedient workers. People who are just smart enough to run the machines and do the paperwork and just dumb enough to passively accept all these increasingly shittier jobs with the lower pay, the longer hours, the reduced benefits, the end of overtime, and the vanishing pension that disappears the minute you go to collect it. And now they're coming for your Social Security money. They want your fucking retirement money. They want it back so they can give it to their criminal friends on Wall Street. And you know something? They'll get it. They'll get it all from you sooner or later because they own this fucking place. It's a big club, and you ain't in it. You and I are not in the big club. By the way, it's the same big club they used to beat you over the head with all day long when they tell you what to believe. All day long, beating you over the head in their media, telling you what to believe, what to think, and what to buy. The table is tilted, folks. The game is rigged. And nobody seems to notice. Nobody seems to care. Good, honest, hard-working people, white collar, blue collar, doesn't matter what color shirt you have on. Good, honest, hard-working people continue. These are people of modest means. Continue to elect these rich cocksuckers who don't give a fuck about them. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't give a fuck about you. They don't care about you at all. At all. At all. And, you know? And nobody seems to notice, nobody seems to care. That's what the owners count on, the fact that Americans will probably remain willfully ignorant because the owners of this country know the truth. It's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it.
During emergency situations, we often come together for the common good. Supporting one another to survive by lending a helping hand during disasters, we're even capable of risking our lives to help save one another. However, under many circumstances, when we are comfortable and complacent, we human beings tend to go with the flow. Our trustworthy nature sometimes taken advantage of by those who may not be looking out for our best interests. But then, how exactly might we be manipulated? Could the manipulation be subtle enough that if we're not even aware of it, we end up more prone to its exploiting effect? New York Times best-selling author Robert Prechter Jr. coined the word socionomics, which explains the relationship between human social behavior and the state of the economy. It has been argued that those who control our financial infrastructure often lead or guide social trends through manipulation. Socionomics, on the other hand, reveals how social mood is often the cause and economic outcome is the effect. Sounds a bit confusing, right? Well, consider this next gentleman. A man named Edward Bernays pioneered the term public relations and was the father of modern propaganda techniques and advertising. His vision transformed advertising from fulfilling need to creating desire. He also happened to be the nephew of Sigmund Freud.
The conscious and intelligent manipulation of the organized habits and opinions of the masses is an important element in a democratic society. Those who manipulate this unseen mechanism of society constitute an invisible government, which is the true ruling power of our country. We are governed, our minds are molded, our tastes formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of.
Bernays set out to experiment with the minds of the popular classes. His most dramatic experiment was to persuade women to smoke. At that time, there was a taboo against women smoking, and one of his early clients, George Hill, the president of the American Tobacco Corporation, asked Bernays to find a way of breaking it.
He said, we're losing half of our market because men have invoked a taboo against women smoking in public. Can you do anything about that? I said, let me think about it. And then I said, have I your permission to see a psychoanalyst to find out what cigarettes mean to women? He said, what'll it cost? So I called up Dr. Brill, A.A. Brill, who was a leading psychoanalyst in New York at that time.
How come you didn't call your uncle? Why didn't you call your uncle?
Because he was in Vienna.
A.A. Brill was one of the first psychoanalysts in America. And for a large fee, he told Bernays that cigarettes were a symbol of the penis and of male sexual power. He told Bernays that if he could find a way to connect cigarettes with the idea of challenging male power, then women would smoke, because then they would have their own penises.
So if you understand how the manipulation works, then all you have to do is identify, oh, this person is using bandwagon techniques. Like, in my public school, I was taught, and it was like 3rd or 4th grade, about the various forms of propaganda.
You know, most of my life I was pretty skeptical of advertising, and I really didn't believe that people would do what they were told to do. I didn't believe that people were so malleable, and I didn't believe that people would accept information at face value, and yet all the time I didn't believe any of that. I accepted information at face value. And so I think the genius of the Edward Bernays of the world is to realize that man is a very malleable, fickle, and docile creature, mentally docile creature, who will virtually do whatever he's told, especially if there's a little payday at the end.
The number one means of taking control of somebody is by controlling their mind and what they think what they think is correct or not. It's psychological warfare.
Oh, these are the different ways that people make people do things they don't want to do, other than giving them money.
Every year, New York held an Easter Day parade to which thousands came, and Bernays decided to stage an event there. He persuaded a group of rich debutantes to hide cigarettes under their clothes. Then they should join the parade, and at a given signal from him, they were to light up the cigarettes dramatically. Bernays then informed the press that he had heard that a group of suffragettes were preparing to protest by lighting up what they called torches of freedom.
He knew this would be an outcry, and he knew that all of the photographers would be there to capture this moment, and so he was ready with a phrase which was torches of freedom. And so here you have a symbol, women, young women, debutantes, smoking a cigarette in public with a phrase that means anybody who believes in this kind of equality pretty much has to support them in the ensuing debate about this, because torches of freedom. I mean, what's on all American coins? It's liberty. She's holding up the torch. And so the next day, this was not just in all of the New York, it was across the United States and around the world. And from that point forward, the sale of cigarettes to women began to rise. He had made them socially acceptable with a single symbolic act.
What Bernays had created was the idea that if a woman smoked, it made her more powerful and independent, an idea that still persists today.
Bernays made it socially acceptable for women to smoke cigarettes, and similar techniques of co-opted messaging and relabeling of things in order to create progress has become only more intense in the last few decades as the push for globalization and further centralization of governing power has increased.
But clearly, it is the intelligent minorities which need to make use of propaganda continuously and systematically. Small groups of persons can and do make the rest of us think what they please about a given subject.
Basically, I mean, first of all, it's fundamental. TV is a mind-controlled device. It runs at 60 megahertz, same frequency, as your mind receives patterns on it. It's continuously been used as a device to inject information into novice minds or people who have no discernment in the information they take in. So basically, if you're not making a conscious decision on the information you're taking in, you're just storing everything. Are you storing it all as truth? Like, how are you disseminating what you just saw in the commercial and what you saw in the news? And people don't, and that's why commercials work. And that's why they spend billions of dollars a year, because showing you something that's false right next to something that you just took to be true. Oh, I like Wendy's hamburgers. Okay, I want to, it makes you want to, next time you drive by, you remember that commercial and you pull in there. So they have made their money. Capitalism is basically, it works off of a contrived shortage. And the people who contrive the shortage are the people who know how best to work the system against everyone else and make a profit, right? And charge interest and fractional reserve lending and all these little schemes that they've used to basically infiltrate us and drain us of every piece of worth and then bury us and then charge us for that, right?
What the corporations realized they had to do was transform the way the majority of Americans thought about products. One leading Wall Street banker, Paul Mazur of Lehman Brothers, was clear about what was necessary. We must shift America, he wrote, from a needs to a desires culture. People must be trained to desire, to want new things even before the old have been entirely consumed. We must shape a new mentality in America. Man's desires must overshadow his needs.
Thanks to a takeover of the printing industry and creation of the education industry, small elite super wealthy groups of people have been able to hide their darker connections and pasts of exploitation and misery by sugarcoating their images in textbooks that are taught as official history.
And I'd say, "What's your name?" He'd say, "Al Jolson." I'd say, "Mr. President, Al Jolson." Next day, every newspaper in the United States had a front page story. President Coolidge entertains actors at White House. And the Times had a headline which said, "President nearly laughed."
You don't really realize what's being done to you. And in that way, I think that the corporate media molests and accosts the unknowing people who sit there and take it in for reality, because it's scripted. You don't know who's writing these scripts, and if you look and see where the intelligence people are mingling in with the media, and if you go back and trace it, you have J.P. Morgan talking about how he bought off the heads of all the media back in the early 1900s.
And so that there's this real openness to Bernays' techniques being used to sell products to the masses.
Beginning in the early 20s, the New York banks funded the creation of chains of department stores across America. They were to be the outlets for the mass-produced goods, and Bernays' job was to produce the new type of customer. Bernays began to create many of the techniques of mass consumer persuasion that we now live with. He was employed by William Randolph Hearst to promote his new women's magazines, and Bernays glamorized them by placing articles and advertisements that linked products made by others of his clients to famous film stars like Clara Bow, who was also his client. Bernays also began the practice of product placement in the movies, and he dressed the stars at the film's premieres with clothes and jewellery from other firms he represented. He was, he claimed, the first person to tell car companies they could sell cars as symbols of male sexuality. He employed psychologists to issue reports that said products were good for you, and then pretended they were independent studies. He organised fashion shows in department stores, and paid celebrities to repeat the new and essential message: you bought things not just for need, but to express your inner sense of yourself to others.
The public basically has their opinions formed by consensus, polls, things like this that are used to steer populations.
It is often said that half of writing history consists of the winners hiding their own atrocities. The largest problem lies in the control of information. If the people in charge of dispensing information become corrupted to an organized elite bent on domination, then we no longer have a trusted source investigating the true agendas of our leaders. Let's talk politics. You may have already considered that politics is a game of deception, maneuvering oneself into having as much control as possible, while at the same time maintaining the squeakiest public image. As countless scandals have indicated, Lord Acton was right. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So let's talk power. If there are those who truly wanted to rule the world, do you think it would be wise of them to put themselves as the true rulers in the public eye? Or do you think it would be safer and wiser for them to guard their privacy in obscurity, with layer after layer of easily controlled political leaders, with a series of middlemen acting as public figures to create a buffer of control and create a false dichotomy of choices whereby you can choose Republican or Democrat, liberal or conservative? You still have to stay within a two-party system of right versus left. It's like being thirsty and given a choice of only Coke or Pepsi. What is the difference when I only want a glass of water? It's simple. It creates divisions and diversions to protect rulers in the shadows of secrecy, away from the awareness of the people who might challenge their power.
Well, if you study history a couple hundred years ago, and you find these parties went through an evolution, and at one point Democrats and Republicans were in the same party. But where did our choice go? Where did our choice go? Well, that's the whole thing. They don't give us choice. They give you this hand or this hand, but you're getting to the same body, in the same educational structure. And people were like, well, this control structure has existed for thousands of years, and you just found out about it, so how are we going to do it? Well, the fact that we just found out about it, I think, is a big step. Because once, people find out and that information propagates, even if they try to bury it again, in 500 years, somebody might uncover some archive, and it has all this information. It totally changes that, the whole dynamic of where things go.
Government as an entity in general, do you trust the machinery of the system?
Yeah, I would say to a certain degree, yeah.
Okay. Do you trust your government?
About as far as I can throw them. Do you think the government would ever lie to protect the people?
I think everybody's got something to hide, something they don't want everybody to know.
I don't think we all need to know it.
The government likes to keep things hidden, you know, the truth away from us. They don't really need to lie to us as much as it is sort of to show us the wrong truth.
If someone writes something on a piece of paper and, you know, there's little details in there about, you know, things that they can protect themselves, I don't worry about that. Yeah, again, like, you know, you're thinking about the little things, right? Like, I mean, I know there's lots of policies with lots of details and everything. I mean...
I don't think it. I know they have been lying to us.
Okay.
It's been happening for a while now.
Well, again, I don't worry about stuff like that. Like, well, I'm a Christian, so I believe, you know, God is taking care of all of us, and I don't have to worry about other people, what they think or say.
To understand how this power structure works to keep us all under a general level of control, you need to understand the concept of compartmentalization. If you were to call your cable company, needing for some reason to speak with the owner, you'd have to go through a chain of people, starting from the bottom, the call center. From there, you would get one of the hundreds of people in the call center to pass you on to his or her supervisor. Of the few dozen supervisors, you would then ask to speak to the supervisor's manager. And of the handful of managers, you might ask to speak to the manager's boss, who is one of a small number of department heads. They would then direct you to one of a few vice presidents, who could possibly let you speak with the single president or CEO who sits at the top of the corporate structure. Now, think of a pyramid structure, kind of like the one on the back of a US dollar bill. Picture the CEO of a corporation, or president of a nation, chief of an intelligence agency, or general in an army. That guy is the leader. Sometimes he's elected, sometimes not. He will have an agenda of things he wants done in the form of actions by the people below him in the command structure. The leader can pass orders down to the next level, to the vice president, or lieutenant commander, or project manager. And each inferior level of management will then pass those orders or instructions on down the line to their teams, and so on. This is the classic military chain of command style of organization. It is also the system of ranking for organized criminal syndicates, like the Mafia, Yakuza, and Triads, and also secret societies like the Freemasons, Knights of Malta, the Club of Rome, and the Bohemian Club. Often the leader is advised by people who belong to what are called think tanks. These think tanks are groups that formulate policies to be carried out by the leaders, and their members are often the so-called experts, statesmen, and industry leaders, and even corporate heads, who also belong to various other groups, think tanks, organizations, and societies. The persons belonging to these assorted groups form a networked system of interlocking influence peddling and control schemes, which, in their various forms, have guided the general progress of humanity for hundreds, if not thousands, of years.
There are these think tanks out there as well. And these entities are basically there to cook ideas based on what they need in the background and how they're going to get it from us and how they're going to get what they want at the end, and we're going to be left, like, you know, holding the bag, being hoodwinked. And those think tanks are responsible for some of the worst atrocities ever to befall mankind, because I know that there were think tanks back in the 20s and 30s that are like, if we fund these guys, they'll go over and take over Europe for us. And we won't have to do the dirty work. That way, if it doesn't work out, we're the good guys, right? And we'll bring 40,000 of them over to America in Operation Paperclip, and we'll make NASA, and then we'll bilk the American people out of much more money.
What if our entire system, every external aspect of our lives that we plug into, from government, law, money, medicine, military, education, employment, energy, and even our sacred belief systems, were controlled and manipulated in a top-down pyramid fashion? Is it possible that a handful of very rich families could be at the top of this pyramid, and that our leaders, acting as lieutenants for this elite, control our information and perceptions for their combined benefit and at our expense? Hegel. It's important to be aware of a German philosopher named Hegel and one of his philosophies called the Hegelian dialectic, or problem, reaction, solution. This theory says that in order to create progress, a group in power may have to do things that will be disliked by an aware populace. So what they do is create a problem which garners a desired reaction of the population, saying, something must be done to fix this problem. And then the solution is offered in the form of the progress you had already planned. So for instance, a sound motive often presented by 9/11 conspiracy researchers is that the U.S. government desired to pass the USA Patriot Act, which gave it a ton of new controls, powers, and abilities over the general population. However, there was no reason to pass this law, that is, until the event of 9/11, after which this complex 300-page law was rushed through Congress without most members even reading it.
And this is, the misappropriation of Hegel's, dialect, the Hegelian dialect, where it's been morphed into, they create a problem because they seek you to provide a reaction so that they can provide you with the solution from which they profiteer and steal your freedom and liberty. Whether it's, with 9/11 where they're saying, well, we have to protect you now, so now we're going to put a fence around your country. And now we're going to have national ID cards because these terrorists got fake ID. And basically, they have a checklist of things they want.
On October 26, 2001, 40 days after the 9/11 attacks, President George Bush signed into law the USA Patriot Act, an acronym for Uniting and Strengthening America by providing appropriate tools required to intercept and obstruct terrorism. The mark of this being part of a Hegelian dialectic is that the Patriot Act was offered as a solution to the people of the United States, even though it had been written before the 9/11 attacks.
In politics, nothing happens by accident. If it happens, you can be sure it was planned that way.
So then, what is the truth? What is the plan? Is our world under a subtle form of dominating control by elite families who've planned for at least several hundred years to create a one-world government that controls all information and enforces that control with a world army, funding everything with a one-world currency that's electronically based and cashless? Are we heading towards a version of the future not unlike 1984, where elites desire us to be implanted with microchips that verify our identity, our bank account digits, and all other pertinent information, including our location, tying us permanently to their system, and thus ending the idea of the free sovereign human? Those who hold financial, governmental, and authoritative power have the motive and opportunity to use social engineering techniques that have been perfected over the last 100 years to create whatever trends are set before us, whether it's a fashion fad or marketing a profitable war. They've deduced that only 15% of us use deductive reasoning and critical thinking, while the other 85% simply follow blindly and believe whatever they're told, because of an unquestioningly obedient posture towards those who claim authority. To get a better understanding of how this works in regards to both financial and social manipulation, visit thecauseofeffect.com for further information. On this website, you'll also find resources to give you a more complete view of how authoritative institutions are structured and why they push towards consolidating and centralizing power, including a very frank look at the outlined goals of the elites who exercise their power today.